Today is going to be all about different piping nozzles and piping techniques. I know it can be slightly confusing as to which piping nozzles to buy and where to get them from. In this video, I'll show you all the piping nozzles that I love and how I use them to decorate my cakes and cupcakes. Let's get started. Before we get into the piping nozzles and techniques, let's first fill our piping bags. These are very easily available online and I'll leave the link for them in the description box below. The first thing that you need to do is to put a piping tip inside the bag and then snip this end of the cone using scissors according to the size of the tip. And then your piping bag is ready to be filled with the frosting. Now to fill in the piping bag, what a lot of people like to do is to use their palm to form a C and then hold the top end of the piping bag. And they also fold the edges of the piping bag around their hand. Now instead of using my hand, what I like to do is I use a drinking glass or a jar to do the same process, which gives me both my hands free to then transfer the frosting using a spatula. Use a spatula to stuff the filling, push the filling down completely, pushing out the air bubbles if any, and then twist the top end and lock it with your thumb and first finger. So you'll see that I've only filled 2/3 of the piping bag. If I overfill it, there'll be no space left to punch out the frosting. And once I create pressure from this hand, it'll create so much pressure that the bag will tear and it'll create a huge mess. So before we get piping, let's actually understand the best way to hold a piping bag. Always use your dominant hand on top. So I'm a lefty, I'll be using my left hand on top of the piping bag, and this is the hand that I'll use to create pressure from top. And then use your other hand, which is my right hand, closer to the piping nozzle, which will help support the dominant hand and also guide your piping bag once you're piping. It's a great tip for anybody who's just starting out. Just make sure your hands are steady and you're ready to get piping. Now that we know how to work that piping bag, let's start talking about the piping nozzles. I'm going to share with you 5 piping tips that I use in my kitchen very often. The first one that I want to share with you is an open star tip. If you look closely, you will see that the points of this tip are facing forward and not curving towards the center. You can use the open star tip to make swirls which look extremely pretty. I often use these swirls when I want to cover a large part of the dessert because they're extremely simple to make. All you need to do is to hold the piping bag vertically to the dessert, start from the inside and then keep moving towards the outside and then leave. I also like to make these cute star dollops with this tip. Keep your piping bag vertical to the dessert and pipe. You can count till 2 in your head and pull away like so. The open star tip is also great for making swirls on cupcakes. The next tip is slightly similar but also very different. It's the closed star tip. You'll notice that the points of this tip are curving inwards and pointing towards the center. Personally for me, this is the one that I use most frequently in my kitchen. I use it to make swirls of frosting on my cupcakes or swirls of whipped cream on my milkshakes or my cold coffees, which look extremely aesthetic and beautiful. For the swirls, instead of starting from the center of the cupcake, I like to start from the edge and carefully apply the same pressure throughout, and once I'm about to reach the starting point, I shift my piping bag slightly inwards and continue till I reach the center. This way I get a good height and the cupcake looks amazing. You might find it a little tough to get the perfect circular alignment in the beginning, but with practice, it'll definitely get better. The other thing that I use my closed star tip is to make rosettes. I'm sure you've seen cakes and cupcakes with rosettes all over them, and I think they make any dessert look an absolute showstopper. To make a rosette, you need to keep your piping bag vertical to the dessert and start from the inside, going outwards in a circular motion. You can leave a slight tail at the end instead of completing the full circle. The next nozzle, which is another favorite, is the ruffled tip. Now if you look closely, you will see that one end of this tip is wider and the other one is slightly narrow. Now one tip to always keep in mind while using this nozzle is to keep the narrow end towards yourself and the wider one towards the dessert, which would always help you get the perfect ruffles. To pipe ruffles, you want to keep the piping bag at an angle and not vertical to the dessert. Start piping and go in smooth motions from right to left. The ruffle can be as wide as you want it to be. Just try to maintain the same pressure throughout so that all the ruffles are of the same size. I also like to use the ruffle tip to make buttercream flowers. The next tip is the basket weave nozzle, which is very interesting but not very common. It has ridges on one end and the other end is completely plain. Now you may not be able to use this nozzle too often, but whenever you do, trust me, it'll instantly make your desserts stand out. Whenever you're using it, always keep the one with the ridges towards you and the plain end towards the dessert. The next tip that I'm sure all of you already know about, but I think it's an essential for a baker to have, is the basic round tip. The most basic thing that you can do with the round tip is to make dollops or even swirls on your cupcakes. The other thing that I like to do with the round nozzle is the bead effect. For that, instead of holding the piping bag vertical like you would do for dollops, you need to hold the piping bag at an angle like so. Then press the piping bag and quickly push it away so that some of the frosting gets carried like this. Pipe the next dollop directly in connection with the smear and continue till you get covered with your dessert. You will be able to find all these piping nozzles online. I'll try to pull out as many links as possible and link them in the description box below. To show you all the designs and techniques, I worked with a buttercream frosting today. You could use any stable frosting. Just make sure it's not too warm or else it'll lose shape once you pipe it. If you feel that the frosting is getting very warm as you work with it from the warmth of your hands, you could pop it in the fridge for about 10 to 15 minutes and then continue again. I hope you guys enjoyed watching this beginner level video on piping bags, nozzles and techniques. In case you guys found it helpful, let me know by giving this video a big thumbs up. And if you want to watch more of these basic informational videos on this channel, let me know in the comments and I'll be happy to bring them to you. I'll see you guys very soon with another video. Until then, happy baking and take care.